The moment Mom spoke, I knew something was about to change forever. "I've never told anyone this before," she said, her voice carrying a weight I had never heard from her before. She sat across from me in the living room, her hands clasped together, her eyes filled with something that looked like both regret and relief. I could feel the weight of her words pressing into the silence between us. The house felt strangely empty without Dad. He had left for a conference for the weekend, and I had expected the time alone with Mom to be filled with nothing more than the usual routine: football on TV, a bit of quiet conversation, and maybe takeout dinners in front of the screen. But tonight was different. The atmosphere was charged, as if something long buried was finally pushing its way to the surface. I've been thinking about starting this conversation for weeks. There had been moments, fleeting, subtle moments, where I felt like Mom was on the verge of saying something, but then she would hold back. It was like there was a part of her I had never really known, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to confront it. But tonight, it felt like we were past the point of avoidance. Something had to give. I sat down on the couch, the soft creak of the old leather filling the room. "Mom, can we talk?" She glanced at me, surprise flickering across her face. "What's on your mind?" Her tone was cautious, like she was bracing herself for something she couldn't predict. I hesitated, feeling the tightness in my chest. How could I even begin to explain what I was feeling? The tension had been building for months now, ever since I started noticing things that had always been there, but I had been too young to understand. I was 18 now, old enough to see that things between Dad and Mom weren't as perfect as they once seemed. Old enough to notice that Mom had been pulling away, not just from him, but from me too. And yet at the same time, I felt closer to her than ever before. I'd catch her looking at me sometimes, like she was trying to figure out who I had become, as if she wasn't sure what kind of woman I was turning into. It was confusing, but it was also something else. Something I couldn't quite put into words. I cleared my throat, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "Have you ever felt like you were hiding something? Like there's a part of you that no one really knows?" For a moment, Mom just stared at me. Her face, normally so composed and distant, softened in a way that startled me. She let out a long breath, leaning back in her chair. "Yeah," she said quietly, almost as if she was talking to herself. "Yeah, I know that feeling all too well." Her words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. My heart pounded in my chest. I hadn't expected her to admit it so easily, hadn't expected her to be so open. But there it was. The truth, or at least part of it, was finally out in the open. "I've been thinking a lot about us," I continued, my voice barely above a whisper. "About you, me, and Dad, about how things have changed." Mom looked down at her hands, rubbing her fingers together as if searching for the right words. "It's complicated," she said after a long pause. "More complicated than I ever wanted it to be. But you're right, things have changed, and I don't know if they'll ever go back to the way they were." I could feel the tension in my stomach tight, but I pressed on. "Is it about Dad? Is that what's been going on?" She shook her head slowly, looking up at me with eyes that suddenly seemed much older, as if she had been carrying this burden for far too long. "It's not just about him," she admitted. "It's about me. It's about who I am and who I've been pretending to be." I swallowed hard, my throat dry. I hadn't expected this, not at all. "What do you mean, Mom?" Her gaze was steady, but I could see the fear behind her eyes. Fear of what she was about to say, fear of how I would react. "I've been keeping something from you, from everyone, for a long time," she said slowly. "Something I'm not proud of, something I've been struggling with." My mind was racing, trying to piece together what she was saying. Was this about her job, her relationship with Dad? Was it something about me? But before I could ask, she continued, his voice barely audible now. "I'm lesbian," she said, the words tumbling out as if they had been trapped inside her for years. "I've always been lesbian." The room went silent. I could hear the distant hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the soft ticking of the clock on the wall, but nothing else. My brain felt like it was struggling to catch up with what I had just heard. You're lesbian?" I repeated, not fully believing it. Mom nodded, her expression pained but resolute. "I've known for a long time, before I even met your dad, but I couldn't accept it. I thought if I just ignored it, if I buried it deep enough, it would go away. But it never did, and now after all these years, I can't pretend anymore." I felt like the ground had shifted beneath me. This was the woman who had raised me, the woman I had looked up to my entire life, and yet she was telling me she had been living a lie. My emotions were a whirlwind, shock, confusion, even anger, but there was something else too, something unexpected. "I don't know what to say," I admitted, my voice shaking. "You don't have to say anything," Mom said, her eyes searching mine for some kind of understanding. "I know this is a lot, I know it's not easy to hear, but I couldn't keep lying to you, not anymore." I took a deep breath, trying to process everything. "Does Dad know?" "He doesn't," Mom said quietly. "At least not the full truth. He knows something's wrong, but I've never told him this, I don't know how. And now with you being older, I felt like you deserved to know." I sat there staring at her, trying to reconcile the woman I thought I knew with the woman sitting in front of me now. It felt like a dream, like something I would wake up from and everything would be normal again. But I knew this was real. This was my mother, and everything had just changed. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice breaking. "I never wanted to hurt you." And that was when I realized something. Despite the shock, despite the confusion, I didn't feel betrayed. I didn't feel angry at her. Instead, all I felt was sadness. Sadness for the years she had spent hiding, pretending, living a life that wasn't truly her. "I'm not mad, Mom," I said, surprising even myself. I don't know what this means for us." Mom looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and fear. "It doesn't have to change anything between us. I'm still your mother. I'll always be your mother." But even as she said the words, I could feel that wasn't entirely true. Something had changed, and there was no going back. But the story didn't end there. No, this was only the beginning. The days after Mom's revelation were a blur. I tried to go about my usual routine: school, friends, homework, but everything felt different. Every time I looked at her, I couldn't help but wonder how long she'd been hiding this part of herself. And what did it mean for us, for our family? I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between us, that we were standing on the edge of something we couldn't come back from. Dad was still away, so the house felt strangely quiet, almost like it was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Mom and I barely spoke about what she'd told me. It was like we both needed time to process it. But the silence between us only seemed to thicken the tension, and with each passing day I felt a growing weight in my chest. It all came to a head one evening. I had been sitting in my room, staring at the same page of my textbook for what felt like hours, unable to focus. I heard Mom moving around downstairs. She was cooking dinner, like she always did when Dad was away. Something about the normalcy of it felt surreal. How could she just go on like nothing had changed? Like she hadn't just turned my entire world upside down. I closed my book and went downstairs, my heart pounding in my chest. The smell of pasta filled the kitchen, and Mom was standing at the stove, stirring a pot of sauce. She looked up when she heard me come in, a small, almost hesitant smile playing on her lips. "Hey," she said, her voice soft. "I was just about to call you for dinner." I nodded, but I couldn't bring myself to smile back. I didn't sit down. Instead, I leaned against the counter, watching her. The kitchen was bathed in the warm glow of the overhead lights, casting shadows that made everything feel more intimate than it should have. "Mom," I started, my voice barely above a whisper, "we need to talk." She stopped stirring, her hand freezing over the pot. Slowly, she turned to face me, her expression unreadable. "About what?" "You know what," I said, my throat tight. "About what you told me, about us." For a moment, she didn't say anything. The tension in the room was palpable, like a cord stretched too tight, ready to snap at any second. Then she let out a slow breath, setting the spoon down on the counter. "Okay," she said, turning fully to face me now. "Let's talk." I didn't even know where to begin. How do you talk to your mother about something like this? About her being lesbian? About how it changes everything? I felt like I was walking on a tightrope, one wrong word away from falling into an abyss I couldn't climb out of. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked, my voice shaking slightly. "Why did you wait until now?" Mom ran a hand through her hair, looking down at the floor. "I don't know," she admitted. "I guess I didn't think you'd understand, or maybe I wasn't ready to face it myself." I swallowed hard, my heart pounding in my chest. "But you've always known. You've known for years, haven't you?" She nodded, still not meeting my eyes. "Yes," she said quietly. "I've always known, but I didn't want to accept it. I thought I could live a normal life, that I could be the wife and mother you needed, but I was wrong." The room seemed to close in around me. I could feel the walls pressing in, the weight of her confession crushing down on me. I didn't know what to say, what to feel. But I couldn't deny that something else had been building between us ever since that night she told me. Something I couldn't ignore any longer. "Is it just about being lesbian, though?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Or is it more than that? Is it about me?" Mom looked up at me, then her eyes wide with surprise. "What do you mean?" I struggled to find the words. My heart was racing now, my palms sweaty. I could barely think straight. "Is this about us? About the way things have been between us since Dad left for the weekend? Because I can't stop thinking about it, Mom. I can't stop thinking about you." For a second, the room was completely still. I could hear the blood rushing in my ears, my heart pounding in my chest like a drum. Mom stared at me, his eyes searching mine, as if trying to figure out if she had heard me right. Then without warning, she took a step toward me. My breath caught in my throat as she closed the distance between us, her hand reaching out to gently touch my arm. Her fingers were warm against my skin, and the touch sent a shiver down my spine. "What are you saying?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I could feel my heart hammering in my chest, my mind spinning with thoughts I couldn't quite make sense of. "I don't know," I admitted, my voice shaking. "I don't know what I'm saying. I feel like everything's different now. I feel like there's something between us, and I don't know what to do about it." Mom's hand tightened slightly on my arm, and I could see the conflict in her eyes. She was struggling, just like I was, trying to make sense of this thing that had crept up on us, this thing that felt both wrong and right at the same time. "I've been feeling it too," she confessed, her voice low and filled with emotion. "Ever since that night I told you, I can't stop thinking about you, about us." I could hardly breathe. The air between us was thick with tension, with a desire neither of us knew how to name. This was wrong, this was my mother. But the way she was looking at me, the way her hand felt on my skin, made it impossible to think clearly. My mind was screaming at me to stop, to pull away, but my body was rooted in place, drawn to her in a way I couldn't explain. "Mom," I whispered, not even sure what I was going to say next. Before I could finish, she leaned in closer, her breath warm against my skin. I could feel the heat radiating off her, the closeness of her body making my heart race even faster. And then, without thinking, without meaning to, I leaned in too. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, like we were both testing the waters, unsure of what we were doing. But then, something inside me broke open, and the kiss deepened, became more urgent. It was like all the tension that had been building between us for months was finally spilling over, and there was no stopping it. Her hand slid up my arms, pulling me closer, and I wrapped my arms around her, feeling the strength of her body against mine. For a moment, everything else faded away, the years of hiding, the fear, the confusion. All that mattered was the two of us here now in this moment. But just as quickly as it had started, reality came crashing back in. I pulled away, my breath coming in ragged gasps, my heart pounding in my chest. We can't, I stammered, my voice barely audible. This is wrong. Mom looked at me, her face a mixture of desire and guilt. I know, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I know it's wrong, but I don't want to stop. Neither did I, but I knew we had to. This was my mother. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The days after that kiss were the most confusing of my life. My mind was a mess of tangled thoughts and emotions. I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened between Mom and me in the kitchen. The way her lips felt on mine, the way her arms had wrapped around me, pulling me close. It felt wrong, but at the same time, it felt like something I had been wanting for a long time. The weight of guilt pressed heavily on my chest, but I couldn't escape the rush of excitement that came with it. Mom didn't bring it up, and neither did I. We were both walking on eggshells, pretending like everything was normal, but there was an unspoken tension between us that was impossible to ignore. Every time I caught her eye, every time we were in the same room together, I could feel it. The pull, the undeniable connection that had been growing since Dad had left. But there was more, and the story didn't end there. Dad was still away for another few days, and the house felt like a pressure cooker, ready to explode at any moment. I kept telling myself that what had happened was a mistake, that it was a one-time thing, but deep down I knew that wasn't true. I knew something had been set in motion that couldn't be stopped. One evening, a few days after the kiss, I came home from school and found Mom in the living room. She was sitting on the couch, staring at the TV, but the screen was off. She looked up when I walked in, her expression unreadable. Hey, she said quietly. How was school? Fine, I replied, my voice tight. I didn't sit down. I couldn't bring myself to be near her, not after what had happened. For a long moment, neither of us said anything. The silence stretched between us, heavy and thick. I could feel the weight of her gaze on me, and I could sense that she wanted to say something, but she was holding back. Mom, we need to talk about what happened, I finally blurted out, unable to take the tension any longer. Her face tightened and she looked away, rubbing her hand over her face. I know, she said softly. I've been thinking about it too. I don't know how to explain what happened. I don't either, I admitted. But it can't happen again. It was a mistake. Mom didn't say anything for a moment. She just stared down at her hands, her fingers twisting together in her lap. When she finally spoke, her voice was low and filled with regret. I know it was wrong, she said, but I don't regret it. The air seemed to leave the room all at once. My heart pounded in my chest and I felt my hands start to shake. I had been expecting her to say that she regretted it, that it had been a moment of weakness, something we could both put behind us. But to hear her say that she didn't regret it, that shook me to my core. How can you say that? I asked, my voice trembling. You're my mother. We can't do this. I know, she said again, her voice thick with emotion. But you don't understand. I've spent my entire life hiding who I am, pretending to be someone I'm not. And then when you were born, everything got even more complicated. I love you. I've always loved you, but this is different. I took a step back, feeling like the ground had been ripped out from under me. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was my mom, the woman who had raised me, the woman who was supposed to protect me, and now she was telling me that she had feelings for me that went beyond being a mother. I'm sorry, she said, her voice breaking. I know it's wrong. I know you're probably disgusted by me, but I couldn't keep it inside anymore, not after what happened. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, my mind racing. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening, but it was. I had seen the way she looked at me, felt the way she kissed me. And now that the truth was out, I couldn't deny that I had felt something too. I don't know what to say, I whispered, my voice shaking. I don't know what to do. Mom stood up, crossing the room toward me. My instinct was to back away, to put distance between us, but I couldn't move. I was frozen in place, my mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Please don't hate me, she said, her voice raw with emotion. I couldn't bear it if you hated me. I swallowed hard, trying to gather my thoughts, trying to make sense of the chaos in my head. I didn't hate her. That was the problem. If I had hated her, this would have been easier. But I didn't know what I felt anymore. I don't hate you, I said, barely able to get the words out. But this isn't right. I know it's not, Mom said, taking a step closer. But it feels right, doesn't it? Doesn't it feel like we're finally being honest with each other? My breath caught in my throat. I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that this was all a huge mistake. But the words wouldn't come, because a part of me knew she was right. A part of me had been waiting for this moment, waiting for the truth to come out. She reached out, her hand brushing against mine, and I felt a jolt of electricity shoot through me. My heart was racing, my mind spinning. I knew I should pull away, but I didn't. Instead, I stood there, staring up at her, my pulse pounding in my ears. "This can't happen," I whispered, even as my body leaned toward her. "I know," she said softly, her hand tightening around mine, "but I don't want to stop." And that was it. In that moment, everything else fell away, the guilt, the fear, the confusion. All that mattered was the way she was looking at me, the way her touch made my skin burn. I had spent so long trying to deny what I was feeling, trying to push it away, but now that we were here standing so close, I couldn't fight it anymore. Before I knew what was happening, she was pulling me toward her, her arms wrapping around me, her lips pressing against mine once again. This kiss was different from the first one. It was deeper, more intense, filled with all the things we hadn't said, all the things we couldn't say. My hands found their way to her chest, gripping the fabric of her shirt as she pressed me back against the counter. Her body was warm against mine, and I could feel the steady thud of her heart beneath my fingers. Everything else disappeared, the house, the world outside. All that existed was the two of us, tangled together in a moment that felt both forbidden and inevitable. I didn't know how long we stood there, lost in each other, but eventually we pulled apart, gasping for air. My heart was racing, my mind a blur of thoughts and emotions. This was wrong. It had always been wrong. But the more we tried to deny it, the stronger the pull between us had become. Mom's hands lingered on my waist, her breath still ragged. "We shouldn't be doing this," she said, her voice shaky. "I know," I whispered, "but I don't know how to stop." Neither of us knew how to stop. And even though we both knew the consequences, even though we both knew how wrong it was, we were already too far gone. We had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed, and the weight of that realization settled over us like a dark cloud. But the story didn't end there. Not yet. There was still more to come. After that kiss, the guilt was unbearable. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Mom's face, felt the heat of her touch, and I hated myself for it. The rational part of me knew how wrong this was, how utterly broken everything had become, but another part, a darker, more twisted part, couldn't forget the way it had felt, the way I had wanted it to happen. Mom and I tried to go back to normal, but normal was a distant memory now. Dad was still oblivious to what had happened between us, but I couldn't shake the dread that he might find out. Every time he hugged me, every time he laughed at one of Mom's jokes, I felt like I was suffocating under the weight of my own betrayal. I couldn't look him in the eye without feeling like a fraud. Days turned into weeks, and the tension between Mom and me only grew. We avoided being alone together as much as possible, but there were moments when our paths would cross, passing in the hallway, sitting down for dinner, and I could feel her eyes on me, the silent understanding between us like a noose tightening around my neck. I tried to push it down, to bury it deep where I didn't have to think about it, but it was always there, lingering just beneath the surface. Then one night, everything came crashing down. Dad had gone to bed early, complaining of a headache, leaving Mom and me alone in the living room. I should have gone to my room too, but something kept me rooted to the spot. I could feel the pull between us, the magnetic force that had been growing stronger since that first kiss. I hated it, but I couldn't deny it. Mom was sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the TV, though I could tell her mind was elsewhere. I sat down in the chair across from her, my heart pounding in my chest. Neither of us said a word for what felt like hours. The silence was suffocating, thick with all the things we weren't saying. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "Mom," I whispered, my voice trembling, "we can't keep doing this." She didn't look at me, but I saw the way her jaw tightened, the way her hands clenched into fists in her lap. "I know," she said quietly, "but I don't know how to stop." My heart ached at the vulnerability in her voice. This was my mother, the woman who had always been so strong, so sure of herself. But now she was just as lost as I was. I wanted to tell her it was okay, that we would figure it out, but I couldn't, because it was okay. Nothing about this was okay. "We have to stop," I said, my voice firmer this time. "We're going to ruin everything." Mom finally looked at me then, her eyes dark and filled with something I couldn't quite place. "I think we already have." The truth of her words hit me like a punch to the gut. She was right. There was no going back now, no undoing what had already been done. We had crossed a line, and we couldn't pretend like it hadn't happened. But we had to try, didn't we, for Dad's sake, for the sake of our family. "We need to tell Dad," I said, my voice barely a whisper. Mom's eyes widened in shock, and for a moment she looked like she hadn't heard me correctly. "What?" she asked, her voice low and strained. "No. We can't tell him, it would destroy him." "It's going to destroy him either way," I argued, feeling the panic rising in my chest. "He's going to find out eventually. He deserves to know the truth." She shook her head, standing up from the couch and packing the room. "No," she said again, more forcefully this time. "We can't. I won't put him through that." I stood up too, my hands trembling. "So what are we supposed to do? Just keep lying to him? Keep pretending like everything's fine when it's not?" Mom stopped packing and turned to face me, her eyes filled with a mixture of anger and desperation. "I don't know," she shouted, her voice cracking. "I don't know what we're supposed to do. I never wanted this to happen." "Neither did I said softly, my heart breaking at the sight of him. But it did. For a long moment, we just stood there, staring at each other, the weight of everything we had done pressing down on us like a heavy blanket. I could see the pain in her eyes, the regret, but there was something else too. Something that scared me. A part of her didn't want to stop, a part of me didn't either. "We have to figure this out," I said, my voice shaking, "before it's too late." But deep down, I knew it was already too late. Just then we heard a noise from upstairs. The sound of footsteps. My heart stopped in my chest, and I turned toward the staircase just as Dad appeared at the top, his face pale and his eyes wide with confusion. "Is everything okay?" he asked, his voice soft but filled with concern. Panic surged through me. Had he heard us? Did he know? My mind raced, trying to come up with anything that would explain away the tension in the room. "Yeah," I said quickly, forcing a smile. "Everything's fine, we were just talking." Dad narrowed his eyes slightly, glancing between me and Mom. He could sense that something was off, but thankfully he didn't press the issue. "Okay," he said slowly. "I just wanted to make sure." He turned and went back upstairs, and I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Mom was staring at the floor, her shoulders slumped in defeat. Neither of us said a word as we stood there, the silence between us more deafening than any argument could have been. That night I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, my mind racing with everything that had happened, everything that could happen. I knew what we had to do, but the thought of it terrified me. Telling Dad the truth would destroy him, but continuing to lie would destroy all of us. The next morning I found Mom in the kitchen, drinking coffee at the table. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, her hands trembling slightly as she held the mug. She looked up when I walked in, and I could see the guilt and regret etched into every line of her face. "We need to tell him," I said quietly, sitting down across from her. Mom closed her eyes, letting out a long, shaky breath. "I know," she whispered. And so later that day, we sat Dad down in the living room. My heart was pounding in my chest, my hands shaking as I tried to find the words. I couldn't look him in the eye as we told him the truth. Mom did most of the talking, her voice thick with emotion, but when it came time to admit what had happened between us, the words stuck in her throat. It was me who finally said it, the words falling out of my mouth like shards of glass. Dad didn't say anything at first. He just sat there staring at us with wide, uncomprehending eyes. Then slowly the realization hit him and his face crumpled. Tears spilled down his cheeks and the sound of his sobs filled the room. It was the most heartbreaking sound I had ever heard. "I'm sorry," I whispered, my own voice breaking. "I'm so sorry." But it wasn't enough. Nothing we said could ever be enough. He didn't say a word as he got up and left the room. Mom and I sat there in the silence, both of us too broken to move, too broken to speak. We had destroyed everything and there was no going back now. That night Mom left the house and I didn't see her again for a long time. Dad stayed in his room, barely speaking to me, barely acknowledging my existence. I sat there in the empty house, the silence pressing down on me, and stared at the door where Mom had walked out. But even as the quiet settled around me, I didn't feel fully comfortable. Because deep down, I realized there were some things I couldn't walk away from.